Welcome to the Eduonics Cloud course. Today we are in the topic Introduction to Virtualization, Virtualization Examples. And we'll be looking at some simple examples of virtualization technology. This is a document with the title Virtualization Examples. And you will find this document in the documentation folder for this topic. So, in this topic, we will look at two Type 2 hypervisor technologies, VirtualBox and the emerging technology Docker, which is going to be very much the virtualization technology for the future. It will have a big impact in the professional IT and developer space. So, let's start with the VirtualBox. What we'll do is we'll set up and install VirtualBox on Windows. It's very similar on Linux, a bit more difficult on Windows, so we'll do the Windows install. We're going to download a useful VM image, and the image we're going to download is the OpenShift Origin VM. So here, we have the OpenShift Origin VM, and this is its website. It explains what it does. So it basically allows you to have a little copy of the OpenShift Cloud right on your box. And so you can develop all the Red Hat OpenShift offerings, such as its platform as a service offerings, where you could have a Java Enterprise server, a JBoss server, a PHP LAMP stack on OpenShift. As we saw in one of the technology examples, where we looked at creating a base level box in OpenShift, OpenShift is the best option in that it didn't require a credit card. That's what really made it stand out. And Red Hat Linux is an excellent operating system. Because it's so free, it's also a bit more difficult to use. And if you have been following the news, the real alternative in terms of the Java space to OpenShift is Cloudbase. And Cloudbase has just announced they are shutting down their cloud Java platform as a service. So OpenShift now becomes increasingly more important if you are a Java developer, but also if you are a Ruby or PHP developer. OpenShift 3 is being supported with Docker. So, after we've installed OpenShift Origin as a virtual machine running in VirtualBox, we'll move on to look at Docker. As we can see that they are starting to support Docker. Docker is emerging. Docker is becoming important. So let's start with getting the OpenShift Origin VM up and running on Oracle's VirtualBox on Windows. We'll start by downloading the OpenShift Origin Virtual Machine. Now this downloads in Linux tar gzip format. Now on Windows, that could be a little bit difficult, but it is possible to unzip TGZ fast with the free downloadable 7-zip Archive Manager for Windows 7. When you get everything downloaded on your box, it's going to look like this, just expanding it out a bit. So when you downloaded and unpacked the virtual machine, you should see a folder structure like this. Then, if you see this, you know you are good to go. Next, we need to download and install VirtualBox, and that's straightforward because it has an MSI installer. It needs to have Java installed first. This is the VirtualBox interface. We will go through the steps carefully to create the OpenShift Origin VM in VirtualBox. We start by selecting New. Now we can set it from the Machine menu, which is a drop-down, or we can select New, and we must give it a name. So we'll call it OpenShift. We must select a type, so we choose Linux, and then a version. For the version, we will choose Fedora because it's of the same family as Red Hat Linux. It's a better fit for what the OpenShift VM is. We're going to choose an amount of memory, base memory, for the box. Now this you will give according to how much resources, so you must leave some memory for your box. I've got 8 gigs, so I'm giving 2 to the machine. If you had anything less than 8, I would only give 1 gig to the machine. Then next, now we must create a hard drive. So we use the hard drive or we download it. We select the Use an existing virtual hard drive, and that's what we actually downloaded. So we go to where we have the downloaded files. And there it's popping up, originvm.vmdk. So it's open, create. So now it's creating a virtual machine, and so you should see something that looks like this. So if I can expand this out a bit so it's a bit bigger, so you can see here. Now we need to go through the settings. For the settings, firstly, I select Advanced. I want to actually share the clipboard, so make that a bidirectional. Drag and drop, I don't care too much about it. For the mini toolbar, I've selected at the top of the screen. It's very important. You'll see later when we select that option. The description, I can leave blank. Now for system, my base memory is already configured. But for my processors, if you have more than one processor, it's a good idea to increase the processors. So if it's possible to give it more than one processor, do that. And for the execution cap, you can just drop that back a bit. For the display, we can up the display memory a bit, no more than, say, 16 megabytes. Storage is already configured, and it's got the hard drive that we set up before. You can disable audio. Now, there'll be some special configuration for the network, which we'll go through in a minute. The USB, you can disable the USB controllers. And for the shared folders, this is important. We're going to add a shared folder. So we can select our home drive. I am just going to select the top level users directory. You can select what you want and select auto mount. So I need to select a shared folder. That's very important. So now we'll go back and we'll carefully go through the network configuration for the box. By default, VirtualBox will create a Network Address Translation Adapter, or NAT adapter. Now this won't work well with DHCP, Dynamic Host Control Protocol, so we create a bridged adapter that will obtain a DHCP IP automatically from your server, and we can use that to connect to the running machine. So we leave the first adapter enabled as a NAT adapter. We select the second adapter. We enable a network adapter, select that checkbox, and then we select Bridge Adapter. And then we can have the choice sometimes of adapters. So if there's only one, then you are lucky because you need to choose the correct one. Experimentation could be required if you see more than one choice. Now it will obtain a DHCP dynamic IP. So we select OK, and now we've configured everything. We might need to come back, actually do some more work on the network if we can't connect later. But we've done everything that's required in the first instance. So now, all that remains is to run and install the virtual machine. So we select Start, and it's going to take a little while to boot up. So what we'll do now is pause the video while the machine boots up. Now if you get this far, The machine is booted up correctly, and you can see at the top there it says Welcome to OpenShift. It gives a host, a user, a password, change me, the user root, and new IP 10.0.2.15 on this box. And there are some options you can select. And 5 exits to the command prompt. So we'll select 5 for now. So we select 5, and we need to click onto the machine, and we make sure we're in the machine, and we've actually exited. We've come out of the machine. We're in the command prompt. So now what we're going to do is try an SSH into the machine. Now we need an SSH client to do that. I've configured my box to allow the command prompt to be an SSH terminal. So this is not standard on Windows. So if I go here, and if I type SSH, we can see I have an SSH daemon on my command shell on Windows. This is not normal, so I won't go into that now. Whatever you do, whether you use PuTTY, whatever SSH shell you decide to use on Windows, you need to have SSH to access into the box. Now we're going to find it's either going to work or it's not going to work. And this is the command that we need to use, SSH root at, and the IP address that the machine was telling us. So if we go back and look at the machine, it's 10.0.2.15. So our command in our terminal is going to be SSH root at 10.0.2.15, and my password would be change me. So now, if it doesn't connect, I'm going to have some more work that I need to do. If you are having problems connecting to the box with the SSH, the easiest way to get around these problems is to first run the virtual machine and identify the IP address that's been set up. Then go to a browser and enter that as a URL. So I've entered the URL /console, and you will get a warning. This is because the VM generates its own security certificates. So we can click Advanced on Chrome. We can proceed. So the username will be demo and the password is change me. And you can see now I've logged into the machine. So I've logged into the machine running on the IP that was recorded in the machine's console/console. Now I can choose Settings, and here I can add a new key. So now I can configure a key on my local box, add it here, and then I'll be able to SSH in right here. So that was just a quick example to using virtualization. The advantages of this are now you have the OpenShift Origin Platform as a Service running on a VM on your local box. So you can configure all the services that OpenShift Origin offer in the cloud. You can now configure them and set them up on this virtual machine. Once you have everything running, then you can deploy them to OpenShift, and this will speed up your development time. So this was just a quick example using the OpenShift Origin virtual machine with the VirtualBox provider on Windows 7. So now, we'll just have a quick look at Docker. So firstly, we have the option to create an account, and you can do that at this link here. And if you go over and you create an account, you will get a control panel like this. Now, this is so that you can actually create your own repositories on Docker. So if we go to the repositories, here we can browse the repositories. What people do is they create virtual machines in Docker and then they upload them. So it's a bit like a GitHub for Docker. Now this is an optional thing. To get into Docker and start using it, you don't need to do this. You can use it for sharing your Docker machines. You can contribute to the community of people that support Docker. And these people create these virtual machines for other people to freely use, so you can support that community process. So that's an optional step. The next step is to actually download and install Docker. Now, it's a Linux system in the first instance, but there is a Windows version called Boot to Docker. And so that's the first thing that we'll need to do. So this is the download installation link. So if we look at that link now, we can see this is the installation link, and it shows all the operating systems. And you can see in the first instance, it's very much a Mac, Ubuntu, Linux type software, but fortunately there is a Windows installer. And so if we go there now to the Windows installer, so this will install some extra software that you need to get started with Docker on Windows. So once again, it's a little tricky to get it set up on Windows, so we will go through the steps to set up on Windows. Using a Debian family of Linux, it's extremely simple to set up. It's as easy as a sudo apt-get install Docker. However, on Windows, there are a lot of extra configuration steps, so we'll go through them carefully now. So we simply click on the Docker for Windows installer link in the documentation, and we go to install version 1.2.0, and you could see there is a link there for documentation to help you. So we download this file and run this file, and we'll pause the video while that happens. So we've downloaded and installed Windows version of Docker. Here's the shortcut here, and double-clicking on that shortcut, you will get this prompt that will install your public key to access Docker. When it's finished, you will see a screen that looks like this. So now we have our Docker client installed in Windows, and we're ready to use Docker. So we'll just now quickly go through a very simple example. So now we have Docker installed and running. Let's go through a simple workflow of how we could use Docker to improve our productivity as a developer or IT professional. So let's go to our account that we've created online at Docker. And so this is the link where we can create the account. And if you haven't already created it, you can create it. Once you've created it and logged in, you see your own console page to manage all your Docker images you've uploaded to Docker, and also to access other images. So to do that, we go to Browse Repos, which is something generic. It's not language specific. So MySQL is a good database, and so to install this image in Docker, I simply need to do docker pull MySQL. So see here, what we have here on the left for this repository, I simply enter that command into my Docker terminal that's running. So I paste that command in, and it will pull MySQL. So now it's pulling MySQL image. Docker is a type 2 hypervisor, and it's a container hypervisor, so it's using the cloud operating system architecture, where it's eliminated that operating system level. So Docker is all about containers, and it's a container for a single application. It's very efficient. So this can be a good way to use MySQL, because I can have different MySQL versions running on my machine. So there's MySQL Server 5.6, 5.5. So in different IT circumstances, it could require different versions of MySQL. So this is how it could be very useful. Now we'll just pause the video while Docker installs the MySQL image. Now to get started with the machine, once it's installed, is very easy. So in the browser repos, we actually found a command to pull the image. If you scroll down, it shows you how to start an instance where you can actually run this command. So we paste this command into Docker. So there, I've pasted it, and you run that command, and now once it's running, then you can connect with this command here. So now I will connect the connection command and connect to the running machine, and you can see it's connected to MySQL. So all the documentation that you will need can be found at these links. It will show you how to use Docker in a more advanced way. So this was just a very simple example. So we've looked at two simple virtualization technology examples, VirtualBox and Docker. We looked at setting up the OpenShift VM. This was very tricky on Windows, much easier on Linux. And if you have problems with the SSH access, then you simply copy the IP from the boot up page of the VM and connect with the IP URL I showed you, upload a key to the VM, and then you'll be able to SSH in. And then Docker was much easier. Docker is an emerging technology that will be a big part of every IT professional's toolkit in the future because it's starting to really take over the virtualization space. It's very easy to use Docker. It's very effective and works very